My name is Sarah Cornier and I'm the Head of Digital Experience at the CIPD. Formerly, I was the Head of Customer Experience, and in summer 2020, I got my Ccxp accreditation thanks to Mike's fantastic training course. I work for the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, the CIPD. The CIPD is the professional association and membership body for people who work in human resources and learning and development. We're based in London in the UK, and we're one of the largest professional bodies in the UK with 150,000 members. In this session, I want to introduce you to design thinking and the role that it plays in customer experience, and also to talk through how we've introduced design thinking at the CIPD. So there's 5 strategic and commercial reasons why I've introduced design thinking to the CX toolkit at CIPD. Relevance, value, expectation, profit, and culture. So let's have a look first at relevance and value. When I first took on the CX role at CIPD, I introduced a quarterly member survey to find out what our net easy, customer satisfaction and NPS scores were, along with a number of other metrics. And we included in that survey a few open-ended questions. Analysis of the results showed that over half of the people who left feedback felt that their CIPD membership didn't represent value for money, or it wasn't relevant to their professional life. Pretty serious stuff. Not only was CIPD not easy to do business with, we were also failing on the most basic areas of our value proposition and our brand promise. What we were desperately in need of was CX interventions on 2 fronts: to design out bad customer experience so that we were much easier to do business with, but also to design in good customer experience so that we're relevant and valuable to our members. We needed to introduce customer-focused innovation. But when I talked about innovation, I would hear colleagues, sometimes quite senior colleagues, say, we're not Apple, we're not a Silicon Valley startup, we're a 107-year-old membership body. Why would we even need innovation? Do our members expect us to be innovative? This real sort of confusion about what innovation actually meant. The thing is, of course, the CIPD is competing with Apple. We're competing with Apple, with Google, with Deliveroo, with Uber. Customer expectations are, as we all know, growing ever higher. And every company that has an online presence is competing with the Silicon Valley big boys. Customers are now so used to effortless, convenient, and intuitive digital experiences that when they encounter a poor user experience, there's a high level of cognitive load, the amount of working memory that we have to engage to perform what we expect to be quite simple tasks. So people expect the same level of customer focus, the same level of customer and digital experience from their professional body as they expect from the big tech brands. Enter design thinking. Companies across the world are introducing design thinking because it gives them a competitive advantage and it makes them more profitable. With design thinking, products are laser focused on user need and therefore they're more desirable. And products are iteratively user tested before launch and therefore they're more functional and less prone to error. McKinsey's Business Value of Design report found that higher design index scores relating to leadership, cross-functional teams, continuous iteration and user experience. Higher scores correlated with higher revenue growth and higher shareholder returns. The McKinsey report found that one of the defining characteristics of these top performing companies is that they make user-centered design everyone's responsibility. Design is not a siloed function, it's more than a department, it's about cross-functional talent. So let's take the example of SAP, the business systems behemoth. I'm sure you've all come across them. And over the past few years, SAP has put the customer experience, the UX and product design at the very heart of its business, so much so that it's now winning design awards. Andrea Hauser, the global head of design at SAP, is quoted as saying, if a modern company has customer experience at its heart, then roughly 1 in 10 employees will be designers. But how do you develop a great customer experience and how do you introduce innovation when you have no designers? And what do we mean by design anyway? This is what lots of people think of when they think of design: the design of material objects, the design of visual communication, the design of online interfaces. Or when they think of design, they think that it's something that those crazy creative people do, the people over there with the cool glasses and the black polo necks. It's not for us mere mortals. But actually, design is something else. Design is what links creativity and innovation. It shapes ideas to become practical and attractive propositions for users or customers. Design may be described as creativity deployed to a specific end. So I like this description from David Kester of the Design Thinkers Academy. He talks about design as being the glue that connects creativity, the generation of ideas, with innovation, where those ideas are turned into value. So design is how we turn ideas into value focused around the needs of our users. And value can be defined in many ways. It can be monetary value, societal value, but also trust or relevance. And obviously I'm thinking particularly of our members here. Design thinking takes designers' tools and it democratizes the design process. It codifies the innovation process of turning ideas into value, because as the American industrial designer Raymond Loewy put it, design is too important to leave to designers. In 2005, with funding from Toyota, the UK Design Council researched the design processes of the world's leading brands. They distilled their research into what's known as the double diamond, a graphic representation of the design process. And it forms the basis of design thinking, and it's used all over the world. Now, particularly if you're based in the US, you're probably more familiar with this visual representation of the design thinking process from Stanford's D School. It might look a little different to the double diamond, but essentially it's the same thing. It describes the same process. So don't worry, it's not two competing methodologies. It's just a slightly different way of representing the design thinking approach. But as my training was with the Design Council and the Design Thinkers Academy in London, I'm going to reference the double diamond. Since Tim Brown's famous article in Harvard Business Review back in 2015, more and more organisations have been adopting design thinking to formalise and boost their innovation. So, what is the double diamond and why do we need it? Well, lots of projects look like this. We have a problem. We know what the problem is. We know what our customers want. Actually, we also know what the solution is, and ooh, shiny. So, can you just get on with it? Now, I'm wondering if this sounds familiar to any of you, but certainly it was something that did happen where I work. And products that are developed solely from internal perspectives can, as we all probably know, be quite disastrous. At best, they're suboptimal and they don't fulfill customer need, and at worst, they're an expensive white elephant. But maybe, what if we maybe go and see if there's some other potential solutions out there? And maybe let's do a bit of user testing before we launch the product. Yep, definitely better. But what if the problem you've just solved isn't really the problem? What if we stepped back a little bit and we observed people in real life situations and investigated the context and the problem space, challenged our assumptions, looked at the challenge in a new light, and gathered data? And this is what's known as the discover or the phase of a design thinking project. So in the next stage, the define stage, we make sense of all of the insights and possibilities that we discovered in the discover phase. And we use that insight to generate fresh ideas. We work out what insights matter most and which ideas are feasible to take forward. Often the problem as we originally conceived it is not actually the problem once we've interrogated it properly. And we'll take a look at a couple of case studies around this in a moment. But this point in the process is where we reframe our thinking, seeing not a problem, but rather a new opportunity. What we're aiming for at this point is a clear design brief that frames the fundamental challenge and the opportunity ahead. What we're after is a tight brief. So design thinking cycles through phases of divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking explores many possibilities and generates lots and lots of creative ideas. It's spontaneous, it's non-linear, and it's free-flowing. Convergent thinking helps us to make sense of lots of information and hone in on the most important piece of information, the best idea, or the most logical solution. And this is a really nice way to think about it. Divergent thinking helps us to create choices, and convergent thinking helps us to make choices. So once we've framed or reframed our challenge around our user needs and we've defined the opportunity, we move into the develop phase, where we prototype and test our ideas with our users. We iterate the prototypes based on feedback, building more and more sophisticated prototypes. So we improve them, we refine it, we test, and we repeat. And again, this is a divergent thinking phase where we're exploring possibilities. In the final deliver phase, our product or service is finalized and launched. In practical terms, we've de-risked the project because we've discovered what the real issue is from the end user's perspective, and we've delivered a solution that meets those needs. And of course, this stage is also about narrowing down and refining, so it's another convergent thinking phase. At its simplest, design thinking can be boiled down to this. The first two phases, or the first diamond, are about solving the right problem, and the third and fourth phases, or the second diamond, are about solving the problem right. Now, with a complex problem and so much information and so many ideas, so much insight to make sense of, the process itself can feel a little bit like this. All of that data and divergent thinking in the first phase can leave you feeling quite disorientated, with peak ambiguity about here and here. In fact, as a design thinker, you have to hug ambiguity. But because there's a defined methodology and a whole heap of tools to help you, there's a sense of security and a sense that the process unfolds in a relatively logical way. Or as former IDEO CEO Tim Brown, the author of that groundbreaking HBR article, puts it, the design process is best described metaphorically as a system of spaces rather than a predefined series of orderly steps. The spaces demarcate different sorts of related activities that together form the continuum of innovation. Design thinking can feel chaotic to those experiencing it for the first time, but over the life of the project, we come to see that the process makes sense and achieves results, even though its architecture differs from the linear, milestone-based processes typical of other kinds of business activities. Freedom within a framework is the prescription for greater creativity and innovation, or as poet T.S. Eliot put it, when forced to work within a strict framework, the imagination is taxed to its utmost and will produce its richest ideas. Given total freedom, the work is likely to sprawl. So I'm going to quickly take you through a couple of examples from the Design Council to show how taking a design thinking approach often means reframing the problem. So in the mid-2000s, the UK government approached the Design Council to come up with a solution to reducing high MRSA infection rates in NHS hospitals. The prevailing narrative at the time was that dirty hospitals just needed deep cleaning. And the Design Council talked to the world's experts, they interviewed hospital staff, and they went in and did quite a lot of observational research. And what they discovered was that it wasn't a question of deep cleaning, because the way that hospitals had been designed in the first place made it very difficult to deep clean. What they needed to do was reframe the challenge from deep clean to easy clean, and how could hospitals be redesigned to make them easier to clean. They spent time observing nursing staff, and they watched one nurse spend a big chunk of her shift cleaning a commode with a toothbrush. And because it was so badly designed, it was really hard to keep it clean, with all these nooks and crannies and jutting out bits where germs linger. And what they came up with and patented and delivered was a new easy clean commode. Now, admittedly, not very sexy, but these are in every hospital in the UK. It has sold all over the world. It's won loads of design awards, and there's an easy clean commode in the London Design Museum. Infection rates have gone down as a result of various interventions that came out of that programme. Another great example of a design thinking approach that reframed the original challenge is also from the Design Council and the NHS. The problem was first described as an increase in violent attacks on NHS staff by drunk patients, and the client, this was the UK government again, had already decided the solution. They said, we want you to build drunk tanks and we're going to increase police presence in accident and emergency departments. But a team of design ethnographers, so people who observe human behaviour, and design thinkers went in and they found that rather than drunk people behaving violently, actually people were becoming frustrated during their time in A&E because of a lack of clear, effective information and guidance. This, combined with anxiety and pain, all that sort of stress that you feel when you go into hospital, had reduced people's patience and tolerance and made them much more likely to behave aggressively towards staff. The solution wasn't more police or building drunk tanks, but rather better signage to help improve the A&E experience, give people information about what was happening, what would happen next, and how long they could expect to wait. And a follow-up study showed that as a result, patient frustration and threatening behaviour was significantly reduced. So both case studies, I think, help show that the solution lies in finding and solving the right problem. So there's 4 principles that underpin a design thinking approach. It's people-centered. The process ensures that the needs of customers and end users are at the heart of any insight gathered and new opportunity developed. Design thinking often employs a technique called design ethnography to observe subjects in their natural setting. Ethnography is the study of people and cultures, where the researcher observes society from the point of view of the subjects of the study. And often you'll find ethnographers living and working within the culture or society they're studying for months or even years at a time. Design ethnography is ethnographic qualitative research set within a design context. It delivers results that inform and inspire the design process. It offers reference material about people's everyday lives, their practices, their motivations, their dreams, and their concerns. Interviews often fail to provide the insights that we need for innovation. These interviews, these types of research techniques require users to predict their future behaviour, which they're, of course, very poor at doing. Whereas design ethnography examines what people do rather than what they say they do. The best predictor of future behaviour is past behaviour. So what people actually do is a much better indicator of the underlying user need than what they say they do. We can either observe users in person or we can video them, or we might ask them to keep a diary either in written, video or photo form. We find inspiration for a new feature or a new product in the problems that people have that don't already have solutions, or the workarounds that people have created for themselves. Visual communication is also core to design thinking. The process uses visualization to explore the problem, reveal new ideas, and explore potential solutions. Communicating visually often results in new thinking and ideas that would otherwise have not been found, and conveys complex ideas in a simple way that's much easier to comprehend. Design thinking is about developing and co-creating ideas with a diverse range of stakeholders, including end users, in a collaborative, open and equitable way. And design thinking is an approach of continuous learning and improvement, using prototyping and user testing to test and measure the validity of an idea. It's a process of continuous discovery. The research discover phase is followed by a design or a prototyping phase. Then we move into user testing. Then we take in the user feedback, iterate our prototype, user test again, and repeat until the product is ready to deploy. This, of course, is a very neat and tidy way of illustrating the process. And in contrast, you may have come across this, which is known as the design squiggle. It's an illustration of the design process, or at least how it can feel as you journey through research, uncovering insights, generating creative concepts, iterating prototypes, and eventually concluding in one single design solution. Or, of course, we have our double diamond squiggle. The point being that this continuous process of testing, learning and iteration can feel chaotic, but it follows a forward momentum unfolding in a series of predefined systems of spaces, as Tim Brown puts it. Design thinking is also a whole lot of fun. And play, or the concept of serious play, has a central role in design thinking. Great ideas come when people are relaxed. Our minds are more open and more creative when we're in a playful mood. The solutions that we design need to be desirable, viable, and feasible. Innovation, as we know, is the turning of ideas into value. And value sits here, in this sweet spot between desirability, viability, and feasibility. Is it desirable? Do our users want it? Does it meet a real user need? Is it viable? Should we do it? Does the solution have a sound basis in terms of cost, time, resource, and revenue? And is it feasible? Is it something that we can technically build and implement today, rather than in some magical technological future? Now, design thinking isn't a panacea. It's not suited to every type of problem or project. When you've got a project where you know what you want to do and how to do it, you don't really need design thinking. But where you've got a project where you don't know the end goal or how you're going to do it, those lost in the fog problems, then design thinking offers a great framework to navigate that ambiguity. So let's have a look at how we're introducing design thinking at CIPD. So CIPD's brand promise, our value proposition to our members, is that we're their career partner. And that means that the products and services that we develop and delivered are focused both around developing members' professional knowledge and providing general career support. CIPD's purpose is championing better work and working lives. We believe that work can and should be a force for good that benefits everyone. We work to influence UK government policy on workplace issues, and we deliver good work through our members and their professional practice. And the design challenges that we've been asked to help with reflect that duality, both the career partner brand promise and our purpose as a force for good in the world of work. So they're often complex, but also deeply compelling design challenges. We've run a handful of design thinking sessions to date, and we run them both as design sprints focused on real CIPD challenges and training sessions. We put together teams made up of colleagues from across many different parts of the organisation, working together in a workshop that we run over the course of 4 days, a day for each phase of the double diamond. So let's take a look at one of those challenges. Now, we found from our member survey data that disproportionate numbers of members from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds are in junior positions compared to their white peers. And members from BAME backgrounds are disproportionately underrepresented in more senior roles. They're getting stuck at junior and mid-career levels and not progressing to the better paid, more influential roles. Shocking, but maybe not particularly surprising. And it was clearly data that CIPD needed to act on. So, colleagues in our social impact team were set this challenge. How might we help managers from a BAME background fulfill their potential to become senior influential leaders of the people profession? Now that's a complex people-centered challenge, if ever there was one. The design thinking process, as we know, starts with this discover phase, where we observe people, we talk to them about their lives and their issues, where we investigate, gather data, and challenge our assumptions, and where we begin to see the challenge in a new light. To balance the needs for good quality research data with the need to keep the design sprint fairly short and focused, my team conducts a research study before the sprint starts. And we gathered the qualitative data that we already had, including research conducted by colleagues in CIPD's academic research team as part of their Building Inclusive Workplaces report. We combined this with our own membership demographic data. We also conducted a series of interviews with people professionals from BAME backgrounds, all of which we presented in the workshop, along with clips from some of the interviews that we videoed. All this helped participants to really immerse themselves in that research and to help them to further reflect reflect on it and develop their own insights, we had them answer a number of predefined questions. Now, in an earlier design thinking workshop, we prepared an immersive research safari. In the run-up to the workshop, my team ran a design ethnography exercise. It was a diary study, and we asked a group of members to record their learning and reflection activities over the course of a week. We followed that up with a series of one-to-one interviews, and my team made sense of all of the raw data, synthesizing it into a series of character studies, which we then presented as a research safari in the workshop itself. Participants were asked to read through the character studies that we'd posted up around the room and then spend some time, first individually and then as a team, reflecting on a series of questions. So, back to the BAME Leaders Design Sprint. To give the workshop participants a flavour of user research, we set them the challenge of interviewing colleagues and members and members from BAME backgrounds about their own lived experiences. We began with a quick introduction to user research techniques, gave them an interview workbook to help them structure their interviews and set up the interviews in advance. And by the end of the first day, they'd conducted their user interviews and they'd worked through the define stage of the double diamond. So we set up each team with their own design station around the room. And we've pre-printed a whole set of design thinking templates on large sheets of card, which we pin up at each of the design stations. And each step of the design thinking process is set up as an exercise, which the facilitators run through first, populating a dummy template. So on the second day, we move into the define stage. This is where we define the area to focus on. It's where we make sense of all the insights and possibilities that we've discovered. And we use that insight to generate empathy for the customer and find opportunities where before there were only problems. That process begins with collating, analysing and synthesising all of the research data, looking for patterns and themes and looking for those nuggets of insight. First, by building out a stakeholder map, and this helps the team understand the wider context of the problem. In this case, they were discovering what people and services influence and impact the career progression of people professionals from BAME backgrounds. In the next stage, we turn insight into empathy. And the teams developed a customer persona from their analysis of the quant and the qual research and their own user interviews. And this persona then becomes the focus and the anchor for the rest of the design process. We then move on to a customer journey mapping exercise. And in this example, we follow persona Ruth's journey as she creates and presents a business case for a diversity and inclusion program, and she pitches it to her senior leadership team. As well as the templates the teams have populated during the training session, what you're also seeing here on the right-hand side are the outputs from our follow-up sprint report. So by the end of the second day, we want to have converged on a clear design brief that frames the fundamental challenge. And we need to convert our original challenge into an opportunity that turns all of the insight and empathy into a new and fertile area for exploration. So we get the teams to frame their new challenge in the form of an opportunity statement. Its structure always follows the how might we format. This how might we format suggests that a solution is possible and offers teams the chance to answer the challenge in a variety of ways. A properly framed how might we doesn't close things down by suggesting a particular solution, but rather it opens things out to a range of possibilities. And our opportunity statement forms the springboard into the following divergent develop phase. So in day 3, we move into this develop phase where we start to develop potential solutions. We generate ideas, we select the best idea, we test that idea, and we look to put that best idea forward. We begin the develop phase with an ideation session focusing on their opportunity statement. We want participants to come up with as many ideas as they can. And this is deliberately fast and furious, because if we spend too long crafting an idea, we fall in love with it and we stop looking for other potentially better solutions. There's a number of techniques in the design thinking tool bag to help with ideation, so that participants open up their minds and tune into their creative imagination. Sometimes the craziest ideas have the germ of something great. A useful game for ideation is how would X solve this? And we encourage the teams to think of an analogous solution or brand. So for example, how would Oxfam solve this? But we also get them to think of its opposite or a real outlier. So for example, how would Elon Musk solve this? These techniques help the teams to generate dozens and dozens of ideas in just a few minutes. They've created so many possibilities, so many choices for themselves that they can feel a little overwhelmed. And we're at peak ambiguity right now. So as design thinking facilitators, we now have to help the teams to make choices. So in the next phase, we synthesize and sort, clustering ideas into themes. We get the teams to vote for the best ideas, and then we use an idea selection tool to help them converge on their best idea. We use an impact analysis grid with user value along one axis and business impact along the other to assess the viability of each of their top ideas. Now, as you can probably imagine, this exercise generates a lot of heated debate. That best idea then gets worked up and fleshed out into a concept proposition. This is the earliest and roughest prototype. The idea is turned into a value proposition with a brand name, a description, a rough sketch, and a user story. This is what's known as a shitty first draft. It's intentionally imperfect and unpolished. It's the starting point for real customer feedback. And the intention is, with this very first prototype, to help teams move from a vague idea to a thing that they can learn from. Now, there's this great quote from inventor James Dyson. If you're not embarrassed by your idea, you're not testing it early enough. So the teams then test their concept proposition, this shitty first draft, with some end users, the people actually that they talked to during the initial user research session a couple of days earlier. At this stage, we want them to find out whether people will use it. Will it fit into their lives? Will customers build any habits and routines around their proposition? What elements of the idea work and which elements don't? Does it even work at all? And do they need perhaps to pivot? The teams take in the feedback from their user research, from their user tests, and they work up their concepts into slightly more refined prototypes. And we use Lego, poster board, coloured card, plasticine and pipe cleaners to create physical prototypes. Just as in the real world, their proposed solutions need to have a sound business case. Normally at CIPD, project proposals are taken to our project investment board for investment decisions. So in the final stage, we invite a panel of judges. These are CIPD experts in the problem space, and we have the teams pitch their ideas for investment. The winning team are awarded the CIPD Design Thinkers Cup. So, what was it like being a participant in the design thinking sprint? Now, I'm going to quote directly from Leah here, and Leah's the manager of our social impact team. It's a very enthusiastic and positive bunch. Often, our gut instinct is to jump straight to the solutions bit to a problem that we believe to exist. But the design sprint forced us to pause, to take a step back and use more insight, research, live testing and interaction with the huge community of volunteers that we've built up over recent years. It made us question whether the problem really did exist and if we were focusing on the right one. Now, it's only innovation, of course, if you turn the idea into value. So ultimately, it's about delivery. So what happened after our design sprint? After the design ideas, we have launched the Aspiring HR Directors Mentoring Programme with a focus on supporting underrepresented groups into those director level roles. 30% of the mentoring cohort are from a BAME background. And in the pipeline, we have another idea that came out of the design sprint, the provision of diversity networks for senior people professionals. And also in the pipeline, we have another mentoring program for mid-level professionals from BAME backgrounds to support them in taking that next step in their career. Our latest design challenge again focuses on that dual purpose, CIPD's career partner brand promise, and our work as a force for wider societal good. We were asked again by the social impact team to help them with their Parent Returner Champion programme. The programme includes a series of interventions, so for example, training courses, networking opportunities, events and mentoring schemes to help HR professionals develop back-to-work programmes for new parents returning to work. The team had 6 months' worth of feedback from the programme participants, but they weren't sure how to use that data and how to build on the interventions that had been successful in the pilot. They wanted to scale up the programme to support more organisations so they in turn could be more supportive and inclusive of returning parents. We began to plan our workshop in early March. And then COVID-19 struck and the world went into lockdown. That intense collaboration, the fun, the magic that happens in the room when people come together in a design sprint to solve a complex problem. I was really worried that that magic might be impossible to reproduce remotely. And it's also something that I heard colleagues say, it's going to be impossible to workshop ideas remotely. We can do everything else with Zoom, with Teams, but how are we going to do that? Well, by the power of technology, by combining video conferencing technology, and at CIPD we use Microsoft Teams, and an online collaboration whiteboard tool called Miro. And I must at this point say there is also a very good tool called Mural, which does something very, very similar to Miro. Miro is great for online workshops. You've got sticky notes that you can move around on the board just as you would in a real workshop, only without them curling up and falling off the wall and that overpowering smell of Sharpies. And just as we do in the physical workshops, we set up templates and exercises, only of course we've done that digitally in Miro instead. So here's a flavour of how we ran our design thinking session for the Parent Returner Champion programme. Here's how we explored and made sense of all of that research data that we'd gathered over the 6-month pilot programme. We created an online research gallery in a Miro board, and we gave participants time to explore and reflect on all of the research findings. From there, the teams built out their customer personas, and they came up with a redefined brief and opportunity statement. We ran the ideation session just as we might in a face-to-face design thinking workshop, only of course we were using a Miro board instead. The teams clustered their ideas and voted into themes. They voted on the most promising ideas, and they ran an impact analysis exercise to select the best idea, again, just as they would in a physical face-to-face workshop. And this is the storyboard exercise where we help the teams to develop their ideas into a concept proposition that will meet the persona's needs and solve the challenge. That concept proposition was user tested with a group of CIPD members who'd been part of the Parent Returner Champions pilot project. And the teams took in their user feedback, refined their propositions and built out a prototype, all via Microsoft Teams. They presented their propositions to a judging panel for an investment decision just as they would in the physical workshop, only they did it remotely, of course. And we even had a virtual Design Thinkers Cup for the winning team. So here's some of the feedback that we got from that session. And my favourite quote here is that despite not being in a room together, we were still able to work as a team. Now the sessions have to be much shorter, half days rather than full days, because we get screen fatigue much faster than we get tired in face-to-face workshops. But yes, I can categorically say that innovation can happen remotely. Now, earlier in this session, I said that there were 5 strategic and commercial reasons why I've introduced design thinking to the customer experience toolkit at CIPD: relevance, value, expectation, profit, and culture. So let's close by taking a quick look at culture. Over the past 4 years, CIPD has undergone a radical culture shift, and we've moved from being very inward-looking sluggish and complacent organisation to one where customer-focused innovation sits at its very core. Design thinking as an element of the wider CX programme has played a crucial part in that culture shift. Customer experience and user-centred design needs to be everyone's responsibility. Design isn't a siloed function. To expand the impact of CX and UX at CIPD, we're gradually creating an organisation of citizen designers. And the teams that we bring together to take part in a design thinking workshop are deliberately cross-functional. They include members of the team that originated the challenge, along with anyone else who's signalled an interest to take part. Cross-functional teams introduce a diversity of thinking that's critical to innovation. Design thinking is a gestalt, in that it's more than the sum of its individual parts. Design thinking tools and processes have a functional utility in facilitating innovation, but beneath the surface, design thinking also has a social and psychological role to play. Professor Jeannie Lidker, who researches design thinking and organisational behaviour, talks about design thinking as a social technology. Embedded within the framework and every one of the design thinking steps is the secret sauce, the magic that happens when people come together to take part in a design thinking sprint. This concept of design thinking as a social technology has three elements to it. Structure equals creative confidence, user empathy equals meaningful work, and the idea that we engage in dialogue-based conversations. And in combination, they generate a sense of what Amy Edmondson calls psychological safety. This is a shared belief within a team that it's safe for interpersonal risk-taking. The confidence that teams will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. And that sense of psychological safety is absolutely critical for innovation to flourish. The structure, the framework itself, gives people a sense of safety. So the double diamond framework and the constraints of a carefully constructed challenge gives teams that freedom within a framework that allows creativity to flourish. It gives non-designers what IDEO and Stanford D School founder David Kelly calls creative confidence. The immersion in real customers, real life issues helps build deep empathy. The teams get upfront and personal with real problems acutely felt by real people. The most important stimulant to a great inner work life is seeing that we're making progress in meaningful work. And as they work through the design thinking stages towards a solution, participants know they can see that they're making progress in meaningful work. The third element of design thinking as a social technology is that it allows space for what Jeannie Lidker calls dialogue-based conversations. One of the biggest barriers to progress and to innovation is getting stuck in the paralysis of endless debate. Teams get stuck in the problem without being able to critically evaluate it or being able to move forward towards new possibilities and solutions. Design thinking treats the problem definition as a hypothesis to be explored together rather than an opinion to be defended or destroyed. And the collective exploration, testing and challenging of beliefs, biases and assumptions, and the mutual engagement and collective alignment around a commonly understood problem means that teams collaborate to make meaning together. Design thinking can help us to engineer organisational culture change. Design thinking is not just about understanding and shaping successful customer experiences, it is also about shaping the experience of the innovators themselves. So I hope you can see that design thinking is a hugely powerful tool in the customer experience professionals toolkit. And design thinking helps nurture a culture of customer-focused innovation, delivering a great customer experience by design.